What's going on?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Oh, I'm reveling in the glory of another Laker World Championship.
Is that what we doing? We going right to the Lakers.
I mean, that works for me. I could sit here and talk Lakers for 45 minutes.
Hey, I saw Magic on today, so I was excited. I'm a Showtime Laker. I'm not a
Same here.
not a drama Laker. I call the Laker the Laker I guess the Laker Kobe years a little bit of drama because I was upset with the fact that they broke up.
Hmm.
I came back. I left when Shaq left, and then I came back. So some Laker people haven't allowed me back yet.
You can come back. I never left. I was always Team Kobe over Shaq. So when Shaq left, I had a lot of bitterness towards him, and that's why, my I had some people say, "Oh, well, is LeBron a top five Laker ahead of Shaq?" And I said, "Yeah, because LeBron came to the Lakers, Shaq tried to leave." So I'm one of those that I'm such a devout Kobe guy that I'll even give LeBron a little more because I thought Shaq handled everything poorly.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, there's titles hanging, there's banners hanging.
Yeah, but I'm a point guard, so
Ah,
never get rid of your big guy. So your big guy, man, I had to roll with the big fella. Kobe. I know you can't replace Kobe. You know what I mean? But you can't replace your big guy either. But I get it. I'm happy they won too, man. I'm excited that they won. I'm glad. I hope they come and win it again because
me
I'm
too.
hearing all the asterisks, the COVID year, and this didn't count, and so all the Laker haters are coming up with all kinds of reasons why we really should look at this as a finals championship. And I was like, wow. So
As soon as the Spurs take down their 1999 title from when they won with a 50-game regular season, then we can have that conversation.
oh, that's that. There it is, right there.
I told you I'm petty. That's one of my biggest traits is I'm petty and I am fiercely loyal to the Lakers.
All right, all right. Now, are you on your phone? You're not on Zoom. We can't see your face. So is
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I'm on Zoom. Do you want me to put it on the camera?
I want you to put it on because, and I was going to ask you. I was like, is this one of those things that you? There it is, B. I said, it's one of those things that
Just
we
making
get.
sure my Kobe poster gets in there.
Yeah, we give everybody that comes on our show a nickname. So your nickname today, I think you won is thick skin. Your
Mm.
brand, you are you are Brandon thick skin or Huffman because you got to have thick skin to do what you do, man. Right?
Ain't that the truth? A lot of people with opinions, a lot of people with criticism. Very few people remember the wins, the good moments. They sure like to remind you of the misses, though.
Yeah. So I want to get into this, man, and really excited that you would come on. We have we usually get about 700 views and 10 shares when the show is great. When it's okay, we get about 300. Uh, I didn't put out anything over the weekend because I didn't want. I'm like, man, something might come up and he might have to go. So I put it out today, and then it was like, oh, and then 10 questions, 15 questions. Everybody want to ask questions. So like, well, I want to make sure I know with you working with 24/7, we don't want to like talk about a kid or kids in general.
Mhm.
Um, but there's some good questions here, and I want to make sure that we get them out. So we gonna jump in because most people want to know who is Brandon Huffman. Do you always get that like because you're a big guy and I always respect when I see you. I've known you for now probably 6 years, 7 years. Derek Holmes put me in and he goes, okay, write these names down. This is who you gotta know. Huffman, Gordy, Biggins. And I'm writing down like, who are these dudes? Right. So he's like, you're gonna have kids, and this is what. So he taught me real well, and you were one of the first people. Do you get that a lot where people like first when they see you, they think, okay, I respect him more because when you finally meet, well, when you meet Greg, you're like, did he play? Or you see, or like, hey, I ain't gonna lie. The first time I saw Adam Gorney, I was like, y'all letting this dude? Oh my God. I'm not listening to him. But do you get a little more respect because you're a big guy and everybody says he had to play somewhere?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that, and I've been around for a long time too. So I've got the gray hair, the beard, and the goatee, and then the head. So it's like I look like a wise old veteran. I played in the early '90s, back in the era of the Veer offense at Ventura High School, and back then there was no huge market for a 6'1" tight end. 100 pounds ago, 6'1" tight ends in the Veer offense. That was one of those times where my same recruiting class, there was a young man out of Orange County who played a little tight end by the name of Tony Gonzalez. That's who college coaches went to go recruit. That was the guy that college coaches wanted. The 6'5", two-sport star who, would go on to be probably the best tight end in NFL history. That's the target market. So I was a small college recruit. I had, a couple NAIA schools offer. I ended up going to Azusa Pacific, which at the time was an NAIA, and now it's a Division II school. And pretty quickly into my time at APU, I realized, I'm going to have a longer career if I decide to work inside the sport than to play the sport. So had that very early come to Jesus moment where I decided to work in the athletic department. And right about that time, the internet was starting to take off. And I got in at the right time in terms of recruiting news being on the internet, but it was one of those where I did have a background in football. I just made the business decision early on that I'm going to have a longer shelf life if I understand where my physical limitations were and just learn the other side of football.
Okay. That's good, man. And that for a lot of people, it's like, that's great. Cause I watch football. My wife is big time sports all day. And her very first question when a commentator or anybody says something is, who did he play for? What does he know? And, and that's the big part with parents. They want to know, who did he play for? Does
sure.
he? And I'm just glad I never, as long as the times that we've talked about kids and other stuff, didn't know you were at Azusa Pacific. I was down the street with Derek Holmes and Pat growing up, and so that's cool. So you got like so many shout outs over here. Derek Burrell, my boy Derek Burrell in Tulare, he's like, tell Huff I said what's up.
What's up, D?
Matt V is going, ask Huffman who's the only guy he ever gave a scout.com polo to. I got
That's funny. Matt's telling me get off the podcast.
Yeah. See that? See how Matt does? That's just Matt. He on the back end. Get off.
Yeah, but that's the the funny thing is you come to meet so many different people in this industry, and it's funny because guys that I covered in my first years are now high school coaches, college coaches, trainers. I remember the very first class that I covered at the time. I was still living in Southern California. I was just covering UCLA and USC recruiting, and that first recruiting class was a year that both UCLA and USC were recruiting Adrian Peterson and Marshawn Lynch. And, one's still going strong in the NFL. The other has retired a couple of times, but, we're at that era now where it's been a long time. But, yeah, I mean, I get that a lot. Where do you play? But like we were talking about Magic earlier, my opinion, Magic's the greatest Laker of all time. When he tried to coach the Lakers and when he kind of ran the Lakers, they struggled. So a lot of times I think there's this mentality that, if you didn't play major Division I football and you didn't play in the NFL, who are you to be a personnel guy? There's a lot of personnel guys in the NFL that you looked at. Some of the smartest front office guys in the NFL are guys that never even put a helmet and pads on. So there's a difference between being able to evaluate and analyze than I think, he doesn't know what he's talking about because he never played the game. There's a lot of guys that probably never played the game. And then there's some guys that were great players. They couldn't coach and they can't evaluate and they can't analyze.
And Magic's one of them, and he's the guy that I love him. Wouldn't take him as a coach
which is painful because we're both big, huge Magic fans. It hurts to say that.
I tell you, 1979, I'm down the street on my bike, LA to the Forum when he won against the Sixers. Saw him, cried like I saw Jesus. I was like, oh my God, that's Magic. It's over. He's the greatest ever. But I think the bigger part is people, they don't do the research. They don't know. They don't get shows like this to be able to say, hey, ask that question. Did he play?
Mhm.
And I think it does give you that credibility. I think for other guys, it's a struggle because we're always looking for every little thing. Like, me and Greg, we had I had a problem. I called and we talked, and he was like, "Come on, man, we better than that." And I was like, "I know, I'm just." But when it comes to your kid, it always becomes.
Sure.
And prior to my kid, it was like, "No, they're right." Till it hits your door, you like, "No, he wrong about this one."
Sure.
Because it's
Sure.
at your house. So
Yeah, and I got a freshman football player myself now, so I'm on it from that side. He's playing high school football. He's playing 7-on-7, and I've always said, like, hey, if you want to pursue football, that's fine, but you need to know where your ability is going to take you. And I think he'll have that rare insight to know where he can play. But he's already talking about going into personnel, whether it's in college or in the NFL. Like, he sees the long-term effects. But you're right. I mean, when it's your own kid, you could look at it one way for several years, and then you become a dad, and it's like, oh, maybe I'm changed. So we've got a rule that Blair and Biggins they're responsible for my kid in a few years. If God willing, he, amounts to anything football wise, I'm not even touching that one.
that's it, man. So one of the questions was, how hard is it for recruits in a 2021 class, and how hard has it been for you guys? And I guess with the COVID, and did you guys take a hit, like not being able to write about a lot of kids? Like, I mean, was it tough in this class? When I say that, I guess not your top 100 guys, but
Sure.
those guys that were going to move up. Was this a tough class was this tough?
There's no question it's been very unique in how we've had to approach things because, we're used to the recruiting process being dragged out. You're used to guys taking, especially in the last 3 years since the kind of the advent of spring official visits. You're used to the whole spring covering guys, taking unofficial visits, taking official visits. And then in summer, you've got camps. In the spring, you got camps. And then in the fall, you have the season. Now, you're seeing so many more guys commit early because schools are trying to get those spots locked in. Players are trying to get those spots locked in. There's just not as much recruiting drama as there has been in years past. And so you lose all those spring events. And we, thankfully, there's been a lot of people that have just taken the bull by the horns and had events, had camps. So we're still getting something. I think where the bigger hits come. I mean, yes, the 2021 kids have been screwed by how everything's played out, but I feel like we're further behind with 2022 and 2023 kids. So you've got a 2022 kid. You saw the difference in how your older two boys were recruited compared to how he is now because they had the spring of their sophomore year to get seen. And now they've lost that. So schools are more worried about putting together their 21 class, and the 2022 and the 2023s are getting left over. So it's been hard. You're really focusing on a few guys, and yet other than, the occasional video of a 7-on-7 tournament or a camp, your only context is huddle that was from 10, 11 months ago.
And that's so funny you say that, because what I've been telling my kids is that you got to put out more video. You got to go to some of the camps. We were at National Preps, which I'll have Trent on tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about that. Recruiting services. Now, advocates are needed more than others because you don't have the ear of these guys. And so a lot of parents are now going, my business has picked up and people are going, hey, we need help, where they probably would have been like, no, we don't, until after spring or summer camp and they didn't see movement, they would have came then. But now it's like, you better do something. And then you still have that group that's like, I'm gonna just wait. And like, waiting is not the game right now.
No, waiting is not especially when we don't know what the NCAA is going to do. And, last week, Jimmy Lake said on the Pac-12 teleconference that he expects the December and February signing periods to stay put. Well, if you're a California kid, you basically got 6 weeks of your season, 5 weeks. Let's be more realistic. 5 weeks of your season before signing day. So you better be really good in those first 3 or 4 games your senior year in January to even be a late offer guy. And, you've got some states like Oregon and Washington, Nevada that aren't starting until March. That's after signing day. So now more than ever is not the time to say, oh, I'll wait, because waiting puts you in a completely different predicament that there's almost no getting out of.
Right. And that's what I've been talking about. I'm glad you spoke to that about the 22s, because that's been my biggest thing with Ian is your body. Just make sure you're ready, classes, because you're going to need your 22. Your first 5 games are going to be what it's going to be for next year. Because now when they come out April, May, June, we're already into the new season.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty tough.
And
so,
then you lose that spring period, really. I mean, he'll have a somewhat of a spring period, but usually, and we talked about this too, with not having a huddle since last November, December, most of the physical growth happens in that offseason. So now those 22 guys, your junior spring is your junior season, essentially. Yeah. And you have a small window, maybe, of what, April to July, and then who knows when your senior year is actually going to be. But then you got to turn around real quick and show that continued improvement. So like I said, for the 2022s, like you're telling your son, that first 4 or 5 games, that whole junior season, that's never been more important than it will be for the 2022 class because of how late it is.
Right. That's great. So let me ask you this, and let me get a drum roll for this, because this is the number one question. And you and I, we laughed about this a couple of weeks ago, me, you, and Cordell, and you're like, it's crazy, and no one knows. And I want to know: is there what did I write? Is there a criteria? Is it? Everyone has asked and wants to know, how does stars work? How I see you smile. I'm cracking up when I get this, because they're like, if he comes on, you got to ask. And I'm like, all he can do is tell you what he can tell you. So everyone wants to know, how does it work? How does it come about? Is it, how does it happen?
So I'm going to have a little fun with this answer, because I get asked this question in every possible way. I get it asked, in an angry manner. I get it in a curious manner. I get it in a, complimentary manner. I get it every which way. It's like an adjective, a verb, a noun, every possible way. Here's the one thing I'll say. This is the question that I'm asked the most. I'll get a text or a call. It's like, excuse me, sir, I have a question. And my response always is, you want to know about stars. How'd you know? Because I've been doing this for 18 years. I know when somebody has a question, 99.9% of the times it's out of, a question about stars. I'm going to read you what my typical answer is, just because I like the response. Well, you see, stars are colossal balls of burning gas, often millions of degrees in temperature. They possess astronomical gravitational pull and are often the centers of solar systems, such as our very own star, the sun. And then the response usually after that is, Mike, you asked how do the stars work? And I thought we were getting scientific here. And I'll never forget, one of the first guys I gave that answer to was Jeremiah Cradell, who's now at Oklahoma, one of my favorite kids. And his response back was, okay, thanks. And I'm like, that wasn't the stars you were asking about, was it? He said, no, but I didn't know all that, so thanks. And, he was good natured about it, but that's the thing, because I get to answer that question all the time. I figure I might as well have a little fun with it. So there's this feeling, I think, with stars that they're just thrown out for no reason. That, we see a kid, it's like, we're putting 5 stars on him. Or he made a great play in a 7-on-7 game, a great play, singular, give him his 5 stars because he made a play in a 7-on-7 game. Right. That there is I'm not saying that we go as in depth as the NFL personnel guys when they're going to draft preparation. Right. But I'm also not saying that we're not somewhat in that ballpark in terms of constant evaluations, constant analysis. And it's not just isolated to one particular event. It's not just, and it's going to be a long-winded answer to kind of get the answer as accurate as possible, is there's a process through it. You go through the process. Some, you may see a kid play in a game his freshman year. JT Tuimoloau, he's the number 1 player in the country in the 2021 class by 24/7 Sports, number 2 in the composite. Basically, him and Corey Foreman are jostling to see who the top player is in this class. I saw him going into freshman year at the UW camp, and he was dominant. I saw him play his first game his freshman season. He was so freakishly athletic. By the 3rd game, of his freshman season. He got an offer already from Washington. USC offered a couple weeks later. It was easy to tell this kid was a future star in the making. But it was still another 7 to 8 months of evaluations, watching him in the playoffs, seeing him on the 7-on-7 circuit, seeing a 270-pound defensive lineman playing 7-on-7. There was a lot of pieces to the puzzle. So the star process is an evaluation process. Right. It's like with the offer process. We see a lot of offers go out today. We see a lot go to younger guys, but it's not like you can't just call the school and say, hey, offer this guy right now. They're going to be like, okay, I take your word. You've got credibility, but we're still going to go watch the film just to make sure he's a fit here. Right. So just like those coaches are still, they're going to take your word to watch the kid. They're still going to go through an evaluation process. So that's how the Stars work. It is an evaluation process. We do it at a local level first. First, it's let's rank our top 50 players in California. And, Greg and I split it up in California. So Greg takes Southern. I take from the Grapevine up. And, you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. You guys are kind of in no man's land there in the Bakersfield, Fresno area where it's like, you're not NorCal, you're not SoCal, but your guys have to travel to NorCal to be seen or go to SoCal to be seen unless we have events like National Press where we're in Central California. Right. So, oftentimes, and I think we do a good job in Central California, but I do think of all the regions in the state, your region is probably the hardest to find because it is that no man's land. They're not at every 7-on-7 event in Southern California. Wow. They're not at every event in Northern California.
You are killing the game right now, Huffman, because this is what our parents in this area who battled for years, and Armand Hawkins is on, and he's in here, and I'm going to give him give Hawk kudos. Hawk came out here, and really another guy, Chris Martinez, who ran DB Nation up in Visalia. Hawk came out with Ground Zero and tried to do Ground Zero. Bakersfield did. That was where you guys got to see Jordan Love and Chris
Barnes.
And see guys. And what we had was a ton of parents going, I'm not going to do that. And you just spoke to the fact that something I argued for the last 10 years, like, we need this here. So we brought Pro-Way Central Valley. We brought this. This is what you need here because we are the flyover zone. And you guys, we're talking to Brandon Huffman, 24/7 Sports. So these parents actually need to understand that. And that's what we battled with, is that people didn't get that, and understanding you have that. And RIP to my mentor and friend and big brother Tony Perry, who really pushed Fresno, really pushed, and that's why I push Bakersfield like I do and the kids in this area. But people they didn't hear that. Like, I had questions in here about that. Like, what is it in this area that makes us that flyover zone, that makes it tough for us to write about? And I'm telling the kids, you're being recruited against SoCal and NorCal.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I mean, it's the best answer to it, and it may not be something anybody wants to hear, but I think the most honest answer is it's a geographical thing. You've got so much going on in Southern California with schools, with tournaments, with camps, with 7-on, and now you got Northern California doing the same thing. And in Northern California, it's so unique because you've got the Sacramento area, but then you've also got the East Bay, but then you got over the North Bay and Silicon Valley. So in Southern California, it's really, the reality is, I'm a Ventura County native, but when you look at Ventura County, the real top talent that comes from Ventura County, it's coming out of the Conejo Valley. So we can it's just by kind of bigger, greater LA. Same with Pasadena. It's north of the Trinity League, but that Pasadena area, the San Gabriel Valley, Southern California is all kind of clumped together, but Northern California is so spread out. So it's hard enough to do that region. And then it's like, well, we still got to make sure Bakersfield and Fresno. And I'm not just saying this to you because I'm on your show. You've been advocating for years for the Bakersfield kids that aren't named Jernigan. And I think back a couple of years ago, Cam Williams. I think back to, even before Cameron Williams, guys that, I had this conversation with Derek Burrell. What's up, Derek, again? A couple of years ago, we talked about his sons and, being that they were south of Fresno, they were kind of in no man's land. And you know, there were times where I remember when I think Bakersfield played Servite a couple of years ago, and you know, I think one of your sons was on that team.
Both of
Blair,
them.
yeah, both of them. So Blair was hitting you up saying, "Hey, who are the other guys I need to know about?" Because there's a tendency, and it's not be malicious in our intent. It's just it happens. There are some guys that if they're not going to where we're at, we don't know about. So if you're playing with Pro A, we're going to see you at events. But if you're not playing Pro A, you're not playing for DB Guru, you're not playing for No Zone, you're not playing for, you know, some of the teams in Central California.
KT Prep. Now you got
KT Prep in Central Valley, right?
Yeah,
you know, so
now my other guys came back. The big guys, they bring in their teams back, and if you're not, no one knows who you are, and we've been saying it, which is awesome to hear you say, because it's like, do they know? And I know you know, because I'm in your DM, and I'm like, hey, this guy, you got to look at this guy, you got to look at this guy. I mean, you guys have done a great job in that,
and it's never been about your kids too, and that's the part that I think people need to understand, is that, you know, you have every reason and right to make it about your three boys, but you haven't. You never did that, and it was about the other kids from Bakersfield. Carl Jones is another one. You know, Carl and Cam, I think they were in the same class, and had we not known about, was it Bijan at that time, or which one was the same grade as those two?
Isaiah.
Okay, so we're going back a few years, and he was the first one we knew about because Derek told us, hey, keep an eye on him. And then by checking him out, you said, hey, by the way, Cameron Williams, Carl Jones are a couple guys you need to keep an eye on. Yeah. Both are now starting in the Pac-12, and you know, guys that would have been out of sight, out of mind if you weren't advocating for those other kids. And so Bakersfield, Fresno, just there's the easy guys in Fresno and Bakersfield. There's the, you know, the Xavier Worthy types, you know, those guys going back a few years to Jalen Johnson. I mean, there's some guys that we know about, they're just dudes, but it's that next group of guys that tend to get overlooked and that you're advocating for. And so now by you making us aware of them, we can get early evaluations on them. Cameron Williams was a 4-star with 24/7, like midway through his junior year, when we saw him at I think it was the opening regional at the Chargers facility. Yep. You know, and so there's some guys that, like, you're doing a great job giving us an opportunity to get these kids fairly evaluated and give them some stars. I think the feeling is that, well, if my son's not a certain amount of stars, he is, you know, being slept on. No, I mean, I think a lot of times is the feeling is that the stars will dictate how your recruitment is going to go. It doesn't always do that, but we don't want to be wrong. We're always reminded when we're wrong. You know, the other night I was texting with someone, and we were talking about Najee Harris, and, you know, number one player in the country. And it's really his senior year where he's finally having the real true breakout season. Yep. And people are like, oh, were you wrong on him? No, he knew what he was getting into going to Bama. You got Josh Jacobs and Bo Scarborough. He knew he was going to have to take his time there. You know, I think back to the years that I was wrong with the guy like Daryl Scott being number one. Right. You know, that one hurts, but what hurts more is my number two was Tyrone Smith that year, you know, and ended up being the highest paid tackle in the NFL. It's like everybody wants to remember that we got Daryl Scott wrong, but nobody remembers that, but you guys nailed it on Tyrone Smith. You know, and so that's the thing. We're going to get some wrong, and those are the ones people are, but we don't want to be wrong. So when we do the evaluations, when we do the stars, we're trying to be as right as possible. You know, so are the colleges that are recruiting these guys. They want to be, colleges want to hit on all 25 guys they sign. If they hit on half of them, that might be considered a pretty good class, but we're not trying to be wrong.
Well, it's funny because I went and looked at like your rating on where you were at. I'm like, got 2021 right now, man. You're 99.16%. All time, you're 96%. So you right there. And that was one of my questions. Like, when you guys are wrong, more than anything, people want to bring it out, right? Mm-hmm. What guy would you say you've missed, and you was like, God, I missed that dude. Like, how did I, or have you saw him at camps 7-on-7? You was like, I just didn't see it. I just didn't.
I mean, you mentioned him earlier, Jordan Love. I mean, at no point watching that guy in
Okay.
7-on-7 did I see a future first round draft pick. And the reality is he got scoreboard at the end of the day. He's a first round draft pick by arguably one of the three best franchises in the NFL, which one of the best front offices in terms of what they've done as a front office in drafting. So if Green Bay likes you as a first rounder, you're not going to get much argument out of me on that one. I mean, this is a guy that I hope Hawk's still listening, because I give him a hard time. Like, remember when you won a 7-on-7 tournament and Jordan Love was your backup quarterback? And, would have I ever seen a first rounder? No. So a guy like him, that's a good answer. I think on the flip side, a guy that I was 100% certain was going to be a no-brain, easy first rounder, future star was Darryl Scott. That year he was a 4.3 guy. He led California in rushing. He won a state championship, was 6'2", 220 pounds.
All the measurables. Wow.
Yeah, everything. And I mean, he picked Colorado at a time when Colorado wasn't good over Texas when Mac Brown was coming off, playing for a national championship. And I thought he'd set the world on fire, Colorado. Never did anything, left, went to South Florida, left early for the NFL and never made it. And I thought he was a done deal to the NFL. He would have been a guy that I could have said, hey, he just needs to keep his temperature above 97 for the next 3 years, and he's going to the NFL. And people, those are the ones that people remind you of. Well, you guys had Darryl Scott at number one. I'm like, yeah, and we wear that L every day. Another one's a guy who he's kind of made, his own statements is Max Brown, who was the number one quarterback in the country in the 2013 class. And, he's made it no secret that he was a bust, and he ended up transferring from USC, going to Pitt, got beat out by Sam Darnold, got replaced by Sam Darnold. And now he's doing media, and he'll say, I was a bust. And in that same class was Jared Goff, who ended up being the number one pick in the draft, was in a Super Bowl, I think in year 3 as a starting quarterback. But if you'd seen those two side by side in high school, you still would have probably said, oh, Max Brown, a little bit better arm, a little bit better measurables. And one is now in media. The other is winning, playing in Super Bowls and crushing it, living in LA.
So when you go there, I want you to stay there, because that's funny, because as you talk about the quarterbacks and you look at me and you, we talked about it with Cody, and you were like, well, yeah, Cody was a little bit different, Cody Kessler. Mm-hmm. And when you look at Love, when you take this area, and I'll take Bakersfield all the way to Fresno, Central Valley, Josh Allen, the Carr brothers, Jordan Love, Kessler, Frank Gifford is from Bakersfield as well.
A little bit before my time.
But when you talk about that, does that even as a writer, as somebody say, hey, we better be looking at, I think I walk over to you and I go, hey, that's Travis Pluggy. There's another guy. And I go, hey, that's Ricky Easterwood. There's another guy that you guys don't, you write a little bit about, but because he does, and quarterbacks are hard. I always tell their dads, they get, I look at Chayton Perry, whose family's from Bakersfield. So I always say, Chayton, you're really a Bakersfield guy. You just go to Sierra Canyon. But who really didn't start getting till right now, like during the COVID, me and Mark were talking and his stuff is just blowing up. Mm-hmm. Does that make you look when you say, you know what, every 2-3 years, something out of this Bakersfield Central Valley, I miss Jordan Love. There's a kid at Bakersfield High right now. There's a kid at Garces, right? That'll be a 22. We better stay close to this one.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned two names. I mean, we had Cody Kessler as a 4-star, largely because we got a chance to see Cody on the 7-on-7 circuit. I saw him at the USC camp. I think he was going into his junior year. And at that camp, there was another kid from that area, Tyler Bray, who played at Kingsburg, who was a year older. USC had Matt Barkley coming in as a true freshman, so they knew their 2010 quarterback was going to be hard to really nail. So at the USC camp, you had Jesse Scroggins, you had Tyler Bray there, you had Cody Kessler, who was an underclassman. So we got a chance to see Cody early on. He was always a 4-star. Derek Carr is one that I would say when I was still with Scout.com, I put 4 stars on him, and I looked genius in retrospect doing it on a Bakersfield Christian kid.
Right.
And the only ones that had 4-star.
Like what? 5A football, 4A small schools.
Yeah.
With a 4-star on a
It was a game against Oaks Christian where my guy Mario Gomez, who covered Fresno State for years for us, was at the game, sent the film that he shot ISO of Derek Carr playing against Nick Montana and Oaks Christian. And that defense that Oaks Christian had, something like, I think all 11 players went on to play Division I football. Some went on the offensive side, but he diced up a pretty good, college defense. And I'm like, I don't care what level this kid's playing. This is a 4-star quarterback. I don't care that he's going to Fresno State. This is a 4-star quarterback. So there are guys like that, but for every Derek Carr, there's a Jordan Love who slips through the crack. For every Cody Kessler, there's a Josh Allen that nobody knows about till he's going to a JUCO. And, there's hits and misses. And, I don't get defensive very often, but what I often say is you can give us all the hard time, but what about the 24 college coaches in the Pac-12 and Mountain West footprint that never offered that guy or didn't recruit that guy? What does that say about their ability to analyze and evaluate if 23 schools never offered Josh Allen?
It's so funny you say that because I have a kid. I got till the 22, and then I'm gonna go hard on the coaches because I don't have any kids. But I have kids that I work with. But I want to ask: do you guys think that when I got in there with my sons and really got in my recruiting service, it was the writers drive recruiting? Do people put too much on you guys? You think?
I think so, because I think there's an expectation that if we put stars in it, that's going to magically change their kids' recruitment. It's going to magically make their kid that much better. A lot of it's we're projecting too. That's one of the big things that people don't understand with rankings is it's projection based. We're not necessarily projecting them or saying what we think that they are as a 15 or 16-year-old. We're projecting them 3 or 4 years into college as a college performer. Now, a lot of guys, they're easy to project. You already see them physically, they're already dominant. There's others that you're like, well, he's 230 pounds right now, but he's probably going to be 270, 280 playing that position. He's going to be special. He's going to be different. Or he thinks he's playing this position right now, but when he gets to that school, he's going to go play that position. And that's the position that's going to get him a lot of extra zeros on his paycheck. So you'll get kids, well, why did you put I'm a safety when I'm a receiver? It's like, because I think you have a chance to be an NFL guy as a safety, where I think you're just a college guy as a receiver. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, you know what? And I doubt Dietrich Riley's listening to this, but I'll never forget this conversation I had with Dietrich Riley, who played at St. Francis, 10, 11 years ago. And everybody was recruiting him as a receiver, but I looked at him, I said, dude, you're a safety. And I ranked him as a safety. And for a year, he would text me, hey, man, can you change my ranking to receiver? I'm a safety. I'm like, Dietrich, I think you're a safety. Urban Meyer's still the head coach of Florida. Urban Meyer offers him, and I'm like, what Florida offer you as? Oh, as a safety. So, yeah, you can leave me as a safety. I'm like, I was never going to change you. He ends up starting as a true freshman as a safety at UCLA. And it wasn't that I didn't think he could play receiver. I just saw a higher ceiling at safety. On the same token, we had Juju Smith and Marquise Lee. They were the number 2 safeties in the country in their respective classes, because I still to this day say if Juju and Marquise Lee wanted to play safety, they'd be Pro Bowlers at that position. That's how special football players they were. Right. The year before Marquise Lee, our number 1 receiver was Robert Woods. Our number 1 safety was Keenan Allen. You could have interchanged both those guys at that spot. Well, Keenan Allen realized that he wanted to be a receiver. So even when we put a position, it's not that we don't think you can play your other one. It's just we think you got a high ceiling there. So there's this pressure. Well, they're not even ranking me at my right position because, long story short, it's all projection based.
Wow. Okay. All right. How much do you guys talk to high school coaches?
A ton. We talked to a lot of high school coaches. The problem is some high school coaches, and I'm not going to lump them all in together. Some high school coaches don't want to do anything to help their kids. And thankfully, I don't think that's a huge problem in California. I think California coaches, for the most part, do a good job of helping their recruits. I think Washington coaches do a good job. I think Nevada coaches do a pretty good job. Oregon coaches are weird.
How many coaches you talk to in my area?
There's a handful. And the ones that I do typically are the ones, like I would say, Anthony Gosselin over at San Joaquin Memorial is one of the best coaches in terms of, going back 10 years since he's been at San Joaquin Memorial. He's always been good about telling me about guys. Well, it's no surprise that his school is signing guys to Pac-12 schools and to, all the programs that be every year. He does a great job of, making people aware of guys 2-3 years before they're even seniors. Like, Huff, I got a transfer that's coming in. I got a new running back, Jordan Hornbeek. I want you to check him out. Jordan Hornbeek fits Fresno State over 5 Pac-12 schools. And it was a shock to those 5 Pac-12 schools. I mean, he told me about him when he first got there. So there's a handful of coaches that do that. I would say Southern California is better than any other region in terms of the coaches helping. Wow. Northern California is getting there. I think Sacramento does a decent job. The East Bay does a really good job. Silicon Valley, not as great of a job. San Diego coaches, not as great of a job. Central California, I would say Fresno is better and more helpful than Bakersfield. But the other side of high school coaches is that I know a lot of them are getting pressure from the coaches, or from the parents. So it's tough. I got 27 Division I players. My coach went 1-9 last year. How do you have 27 Division I players? I know he's only 5'8" and 240 pounds, but this kid could play center in the Pac-12, man. I really believe it. I'm almost like, Coach, if you're being held against your will, blink twice so I know that I need to come rescue you, because there's no way you're seriously telling me that. And that's some high school coaches like that. But I would say high school coaches nowadays, a large number of them feel like this isn't their job to help their kids get recruited. And there are the ones that you hit up, they're usually pretty helpful. And there's some that have always been helpful. But I would say that as helpful as they are, there's still a stubborn core nucleus that, hey, my job's to help them on Friday nights, and that's it.
Is that more from like the old school mindset? Because
yes.
You brought up something, you can't, you see, Ventura, our Coach Gola runs the veer, been running the veer, gonna run the veer till Jesus comes. He ain't running. He might add some different stuff, but he's a veer guy. Do you think it's just an old mentality? And what do you think about that statement that, I argue with, you may know Don Kessler, Cody's dad, and he says, DeJon, your pet, and he knows my pet peeve is, if you're good, they'll find you. That's an old mindset.
It is an old mindset. And I mean, here's what I'll say to that. It's almost impossible now to get ignored because of huddle. You remember, you're my age. We're in the era where the only way you got a highlight tape is if a college coach came to the school. That high school coach didn't tell the college coach about you. That college coach asked about you. And then that coach is like, shoot, now I got to go make a VHS tape of that guy's best plays. And send it back in a self-addressed stamped envelope, because the high school couldn't afford to send the film. So it's like, hey, Pac-12 or Pac-10 coach, can you give me an envelope with some stamps on it so I can send it to you? Yeah. And now everybody's got a highlight film. I mean, you could be an 8th grader and you've got a huddle. And now the thinking is, well, if I have a huddle, I'm automatically Division I recruit. Well, no, but it's almost impossible to not be able to be seen anymore. That said, the whole, if you're good, they'll find you. How come nobody found Josh Allen? Future top 10 pick, having one of the better seasons in the NFL. And he went to a JUCO. I mean, you can make a case, with the exception of Tom Brady, the best quarterback in the last 15 years in the NFL was another Californian who nobody found in high school and was found accidentally at junior college when Cal came to watch his teammate. And only then, in Butte. I mean, we're not talking, he wasn't at College of San Mateo or City College of San Francisco, to the big schools. It was Butte. I mean, you got to go out of your way to find Butte. And Jeff Tedford did. And they found him, but it found him 2 years after he was done in high school. So if you're good enough, they'll find you. That might be possible and true a couple times a year, but anymore.
Yeah, I said, if you're good, they'll find you. If you're a measurable guy that can run and that can play. I've put you guys on Owen Carey. He was he transferred to Mater Dei.
Yeah, you showed me him in Reno.
6'3", 215 pounds, can move. Now he's somewhere else. Colorado offers. That's my next question. A lot of times people don't like hearing this. when you guys, right, you said, Greg has SoCal, you have the rest. Have you seen the movement from a kid from one school to the next and go, okay, he can play? Because I saw him here, it was different, but now he's over here. Does the schools even matter to you guys a little bit? Does it help or?
Yeah, I think it helps in the sense because you get to see the competitiveness that they have. There's some guys that will transfer to a school and they were better off staying at the previous school that they were at before that might have been a Division III or Division IV school rather than transferring to a Trinity League school because there's more, more players that want the ball at the Mater Dei than there were at their previous school. So maybe they were better off getting their 25 carries a game at Division III, Division IV than 7 carries a game. And then you're running clock the second half, so the backups are in. But then there's other guys that it's like, man, when you see him going against that competition, and I think the perfect example was the guy who ended up being our number 1 player in the country in the 2021 class, or 2020 class, Bryce Young. Bryce was a dude the second he got to Cathedral. There's no arguing that kid. He was awesome. His first 2 years, you could see, maybe the wins weren't there like they were at Mater Dei. They weren't winning CAF titles, but I know Kevin Pearson, it was working with him, and you could see Bryce had the makings of something special. And then people say, well, he gets to Mater Dei and he's got this great offensive line, these great receivers. Yeah, but the defenses he was going up against were that much better than where he was at before, and he was picking them apart. So you could see Bryce just take another leap once he made that move from Cathedral to, and that's nothing against Cathedral. It's more just Bryce was the kind of player that he rose to the occasion. And you'll see kids that I'm interested in seeing how Owen Carey and Raleek Brown do leaving Bakersfield and Stockton to go to Mater Dei. I've seen what Raleek's been doing for 3 years, so I have zero doubt at all that he's going to fit in just fine at Mater Dei. Owen's size, seeing him in Reno, that kid's going to be able to just blend right in quickly. So there's just some kids you see like, well, there's now 10 other dudes around me on this defense or 10 other dudes around in this offense. If I don't up my game, I'm going to be on the bench. So they just naturally elevate their own play by being around better players, playing against better competition, knowing that week in and week out, you can't be on cruise control. And so, yeah, I would say there's a lot of guys we've seen over the years that when they made the move to a bigger, more high-profile school, they've improved, but that's not always a guarantee because there's been guys that have made the transfer that you're like, you're probably better off. Your stock would have probably been higher had you stayed.
Yeah. That's crazy. Last 2 questions, man, and I know, and I'm going to say 3 because I want you to talk about a foundation that you work with. Number 7-on-7. We've fought for 7-on-7, not to be called handlers, not to be called street agents, whatever. We're still, but 7-on-7, the role in recruiting does it play? Where is it at? What role does it play? It is an important role, and I want to attach this question with 7-on-7, and then how do you deal with a kid that doesn't play 7-on-7? And again, you already really answered it because if you don't see him, but how does that role play? And then do you get people call you say, hey, Huff, he just ran a 10, like Isaiah Worthy, he's a track guy. So I know he missed, but he played big tournaments, pylon, passing down. He played big tournament, but he's going and running 10-4s and track. Do you get those calls, and how does 7-on-7 play a role?
Yeah, and I think this is, a good question coming off the one you asked me previously about high school coaches. There's been this long-standing rivalry, it feels, between high school coaches and 7-on-7 coaches, and yet some of the most high-profile high school coaches have their players playing 7-on-7, and they benefit from the year-round development those players have. I remember 2013, I was at St. John Bosco, and it was the year after Jason Negro had taken Bosco to the CIF semifinals. And I was visiting the school on a Tuesday. That weekend, he was, I think, at the Oregon Coaches Clinic, and that was the same weekend as Pylon in Vegas. And he said there were some coaches that were asking him, because that Bosco team, that 7-on-7 team had Josh Rosen was their quarterback, Shea Fields, Jaleel Wadood, they were on that offense. And he's like, why would I tell my guys, I don't want you to go throw the ball to each other and compete in this offseason when I know that's going to make our team that much better come fall. Well, then that fall, Bosco goes 16-0, wins a national championship. And I'm not saying it was because they played 7-on-7, but I'm not saying that them playing 7-on-7 hurt anything. That only helped their chemistry.
Absolutely.
I think 7-on-7 complements high school football more than old school people want to concede. And I think part of that is because a lot of high school coaches, they're teachers, they're administrators. They've got enough on their plate, whereas 7-on-7 coaches have the ability on the weekends to take these guys to a school on an unofficial visit. I remember, when you guys are doing the Pro Way van tour years ago, you'd go knock out 4 or 5 schools in one weekend, and high school coaches can't do that. Some of it, they're not allowed to by CIF rules, but that's just, they don't have the time. So I think 7-on-7 coaches fill a huge void to help guys get seen, help guys that may play at a school that's in the middle of nowhere, that's not being recruited, and help those guys now get brought to the spotlight. One of the original in 7-on-7 was Ron Allen and Henry Bell with B2G. And I can't remember how many times they would have a team just stacked with dudes, but then they have one guy who played at like San Marino High School, or he would play at, Carpinteria High School, just some random school. And you saw this player, playing opposite dudes that were going on to play in the Pac-12 that, wow, this kid can actually play. And now we're writing about him. We're familiar with this kid because we're getting a chance to see him at a B2G 7-on-7 tournament. And I think it just helps with exposure that wouldn't or otherwise come. I mean, when the high school football season is only 3 months, 4 months long, 7-on-7 feels a huge time void for a good 5-6 months out of the year. So, and now I'm in the position where I've taken my own son to enough 7-on-7 tournaments just to, go watch football. Now he's a freshman. Now he wants to play 7-on-7. Now he's playing 7-on-7. And the training he's getting is extra, especially now in Washington, where the WIAA won't even let coaches be with their players for certain times of the year. Right. We're having to do everything on Zoom, but he's going to the gym and he's training 3 days a week and getting that work in that he's not able to get at his high school because rules are preventing it. So I think there should be, a coexistence there, because I don't think 7-on-7 schools or 7-on-7 coaches are trying to hurt the kids recruiting. They're only trying to help and enhance it. And at the end of the day, the program's still going to show the kid played at Bakersfield High School or Fresno Edison or at Mater Dei. It's not going to say that they play for the 7-on team, but that 7-on-7 coach plays a huge role in helping that kid get to that level. So I've never been anti-7-on-7, but I don't think I've ever been more open to 7-on-7 involvement than I have been the last, 5-6 years, because I've seen what a huge void that 7-on-7 coaches fill.
Wow. How easy, you said something, about high school coaches too. And I want to put this out here so high school coaches can never say, because you said it. So how easy are you to get in contact with? So, because a lot of times they want to cut me out. They want to cut these other guys out and say, yeah, I handle it myself. So how easy are you to get in contact for a high school coach to say, hey, I got a guy.
Mm-hmm. Very.
So I could kill that today. So now,
yeah.
Because the parents now will say, well, I don't have to use his service. I'm going to put it on the high school coach, because usually that's what everybody thinks. The high school coach is going to do it. I know he doesn't have the time. I know he's a teacher. I know what he's not going to do. But Mr. Huffman said, hey, call me. So you're easy to get in contact with.
Yes. My email address has always been easily available from the first day I got it in 2003 till now. My DMs are open. People hit me on Instagram. People hit me on Facebook. I don't even use LinkedIn, and yet I get messages on my LinkedIn from parents or from coaches. And so I'm very available. And a lot of these high school coaches, now I've known them since, for a long time. Some of them are guys that I covered when they were in high school themselves. Right. And, they're like, hey, Huff, I'm coaching. I'm really a guy up in Mountain House, Jabari Carr. Jabari was the MVP of an old Scout.com combine we did in 2008 at the Oakland Raiders facility. And Jabari's now coaching a high school team. He's got his first Division I player. And Jabari will hit me up. He's like, what do I need to do to help my guys get exposure? And I'm like, man, first of all, you're making me feel old, because I remember when I covered you, and now I'm talking to you, coach to me. Right. But that's the thing. I'm very easy and available. Greg's the same way. Blair's the same way. Like, we want to help these kids get to the next level. We want to know about these kids. What I will say is there's a large faction of coaches that are very helpful in that, but there's still a large number that doesn't feel like that's their job. I've never met a 7-on-7 coach but one. I'm not going to say his name or the program he's with. I will just say it was in Northern California. Whoever said, I don't want you talking to my kids. 7-on-7 coaches do their best to help every kid on their team, from their stars to the people that nobody knows about.
Right.
High school coaches are like, you need to do this, 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 and this to come to my school. I'm like, dude, I'm not going through all those things. I had a coach one time in the Pacific Northwest who told me I needed to reach out to every parent at the school to let them know, my reasoning for why I wanted to talk to their kid, what I've rated them, for them to decide if they wanted to come. Meanwhile, the coach at the number one team in that state who won a state championship that year is like, yeah, Huff, sorry, you're going to have to come at 7 a.m. because that's when they're a weight room. But if you can be here at 7 a.m., come on through. I'll have all 10 of those guys here. Well, then they go win a state championship. I'm not saying because he was open, they won a state championship, but this guy realized I've got 10 players that could be Division I players. This is great for my program moving forward with those middle school and elementary school families when they see these kids getting attention and getting written about. And I just don't understand why some coaches don't want to do that, because my messages, my emails are always open.
Got it. So 7-on-7, I want to ask you this question. And what parents said, what does he think about parents DM or inboxing? Well, if he follows you back, you can DM him, I guess.
That's the thing. And even if you don't follow me back, even if, or if you can't get me on the DMs, you can always get me on email. My email is easy to find. I'm like Kevin Bacon, Greg's even worse. Greg knows everybody or coached everybody or played with everybody, where somebody's going to have access to reaching out to us. So you're never going to have to worry about not finding out about it. There's a way to get a hold of me every way. I mean, once people started hitting me up on Instagram, that's when I knew I can't hide anything, because I just go by my old, email address from like 30 or 25 years ago, and people still can find me.
Yep. And so Anthony Brown asked a real question. I think it's a good question. It's funny that he would ask, but are there organizations that you would say, kids, you would say, you know what, if you play 7-on-7 and you live here, you live in this area, hey, check them out. Do you guys look at certain teams like Pacific Northwest? When I hear Seattle, I'm like, FSP, come on. I know, Ford, I gotta, Tracy's the guy in that area. Do you guys, you guys already know the ground zeros, the pro ways, the premiums, the names of the teams, and those are teams. You guys aren't writing about one more than the other. You're just writing about guys,
That's the thing. We're not writing about one more than the other, but if one has 17 Division I players and one's got 5 Division I players, the 17 are going to outnumber the 5 just by sheer numbers. But it's not like we're going out of our way to, cover one program, but there are some programs that literally every dude that's a part of their program is a Division I guy or is a high level recruit. I mean, those are what fans want to read about. Those are who fans are trying to follow. Those are who fans want to know the lowdown in their recruiting. And so those are, what we're following. But I'll go cover kids that are at schools that, nobody knows about. I'll go cover 7-on-7 teams that may have one guy every 5 years. I just want to cover the best recruits. I don't care who they play for or what school they go to. I just want to get out and be able to cover, and write about the recruiting of those kids. So it's just that some programs have more guys. So maybe it makes sense for us to go to one 7-on-7 programs, tryouts, because there might be 40 Division I guys, where another might have one guy out of 40 players that's worth covering.
Yeah, and I know. When you go to the Bay, I know you got to mess with Maury, right? And
Maury, Terrence over at TMP in Sacramento, Nate and Julian with KT Prep. I'll hit the guys that are in Silicon Valley. I'll touch up base with Brandon Younger of Grind Mode, with the guys from Deliberate Training. In Sacramento or Stockton, you got 209, you got Elevate. So it's like I'm an equal opportunity guy. Right. It's just, KT and TMP might have more guys, but if you've got a guy who's legit, I'm going to come watch him, and then I might find 5 or 6 other guys.
Right. And I know from us, it's always been Guru, No Zone, KT Prep, following now, Pro Way Central Valley. And then you're like, man, and we just been an extension, and that's been good. Man, that's crazy. Last question is funny. Um, Toughest class to ever, like best class to write about, best class. What's one for me? Watching Darnay on TV this weekend, I'm going. This weekend was like the greatest weekend for me, and you probably have this all the time. But I'm sitting back.
Mm-hmm.
There's Buki, there's Credell, there's TJ Pleasure, and Chris Adamore all in this one game. Turn on Jermaine Burton's playing in the Georgia game. Him and Kendall Milton. Turn on Sunday, I'm watching Darnay play against my Cowboys. I'm like, this is crazy. And then, you watch Jalen. These are kids that have all been around the last 6 years with us. And so what was it any class tougher to write about than any other class? Like, has it been like you've been like, man, was it when you went, it was like every time we go, it's because I gotta look at Darnay's class with Jalen and all those guys. I was like,
that class was stacked. You had, all those guys. You had Najee was in that class. Najee Harris was in that class up in the Bay Area. You had up in the Pacific Northwest, you had like Foster Sarrell, who's starting at Stanford now. You had a little quarterback out of St. Louis, Hawaii, that was in that class, who people might know about, named Tua. So that class was one of the strongest classes that we see. You got, Bubba Bolden, who's at Miami now as well, was in that class. Wyatt Davis, who is probably the best interior offensive lineman in college football from St. John Bosco. I think he was California's Mr. or he might not have been California's Mr. Football, but he was the Glenn Davis LA Times Player of the Year. I think he was one of the first linemen to win it. And he was in that class. So that class is up there. But in terms of looking back, the 2014 class, our top four guys out west that year were Adoree Jackson, Juju Smith, Joe Mixon, and Kyle Allen. Okay, now Kyle Allen's college career has been up and down, but he started for 2 NFL teams. Adoree won the Thorpe Award. Right. Juju's a Pro Bowler. Joe Mixon started on 2 playoff teams at Oklahoma, and he's now 1,000-yard rusher in the NFL. And that was just the top 4 guys. I think, I know the number 1 player in the Northwest that year is now the highest paid safety in the NFL, Budda Baker. I think he was like our number 7 player out west that year. So the 2014 class, just because we're now 6 years removed, those guys have been drafted. But that 2017 class, like you mentioned, with Darnay and with Jalen, with Najee, I mean, in 3 or 4 years from now, so we might be talking about that 27 with Tua. That 2017 class might be in another category all its own.
When you project out, what class now do you look at? With COVID, this is a tough one. But I keep hearing, I was talking to Coach Will Harris at Washington. He's like, 22, man, 22 got some guys. Is 22 comparable to 17 or?
What I'll say about 22 is the depth emerged a lot earlier than the 2017. What I'll say about the 2017 is I remember when Greg and I first started ranking that 2017 class when they were sophomores, we had like 9 or 10 guys that were like, these are top 30 in the country type of players. Darnay was a 5-star almost from the get-go. Najee was a 5-star almost from the get-go. Wyatt Davis was a 5-star almost from the get-go. And you're looking at a starter in the NFC, the starter at the number 2 team in the country, and a starter at the number 3 team in the country in that group. And so that top 10 of 2017, 2022's got a ways to go to have their top 10 be as good as that top 10. Where the 2022 class is going to be special is the depth of those guys and how they've emerged so much earlier than where the 2017 class did.
Wow. So you have your ups and downs. So is there a disappointing class where you were like, man, I thought all these guys were great, and you look back and go, woo, that was a tough one. Any classes come to mind?
Explain that one again, because I gotta make sure I give this the right answer.
So is worst class? Do you think it was a class that you thought you guys just nailed a lot of guys, and you feel like that class just never panned out?
Okay.
Really never did what we thought it was going to do.
there have been some classes like that, and I would say, the 2016 class might be one of them. I'm looking back in that class, and I mean, just from the West Coast, I mean, you had quarterbacks like Jacob Eason that was in that class. He was the number 2 quarterback in the country, and then the number 1 quarterback in the country that year was Shea Patterson, who didn't even get drafted. Wow. And so you look at just those guys. Those are 2 top quarterbacks. And then 2 years later, your top 2 quarterbacks are Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, who are going to be the top 2 picks in the draft. So that class, Mike Juarez, everybody thought the world of him. Wole Bituku, we all thought he was going to be all that. Caleb Kelly's had an up and down injury-laden career at Oklahoma that I think is, one of those where it's not been what he thought it would be. I just think that, there's some classes that things happen. Caleb Kelly's dealt with injuries. Mike Juarez has dealt with injuries. Tyler Vaughn kind of had some injuries at times. Trevon Sidney, another guy. KJ Costello got injured halfway through the year last year. So injuries sometimes destroy the class before you have a chance.
It's so crazy. I'm trying to let you go, but the one that gets me there, like Dejon, you always, I'm the West Coast, the most guy. So all these guys are all. Where do you rank the 2020 class? And should these guys be staying at home? It's too many guys. I get on here and I argue with people all the time, and I'm like, hey, SC, you said we got 9. We got Division I A schools. We got enough. Division I AA. Nobody has to leave. Do you get that? Like, I don't know, man. I just think everybody ought to stay home.
Yeah. I mean, my thing is, if the Pac-12 is not going to put out a product that is worth staying home to play in, then there's no reason for these kids to stay home. And, the reality is when you look out and you see what Alabama's doing with West Coast kids, when you see what Clemson's doing with West Coast kids, when you see what Ohio State's doing with West Coast kids, then it makes sense for these kids to maybe go and play there when only 1 or 2 Pac-12 schools are really cranking it out. I mean, I'd love to see these kids stay close to home. And I think it's, only going to get worse for the Pac-12 as you start to see, more and more of these kids that are leaving the West Coast and flourishing at the Bamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio State, until the Pac-12 wins a national championship. And I'm not saying just getting into the playoff. I'm saying the Pac-12's got to be, I'm not saying it has to be USC, but people weren't leaving the West Coast back in the mid-2000s when Pete Carroll had that thing cranking at USC. Kids were staying home, and then those top kids in Florida were spurning the Bobby Bowdens and the Steve Spurriers and the Urban Meyers to come to the West Coast and play at USC. And I think the best strategy to keep kids staying local is to win.
That's it, huh? Just
that's what it really comes down to. Give them a reason to stay.
Al Davis, he keeps coming back hitting us, huh? Just win.
Win, baby, win.
That's it. So tell me about the foundation, because I saw the shirts. I saw what you're doing. I want to make sure people can go. And if any way we can donate, I want to be able to donate, man. I want to support, because you're a great guy, man. I really appreciate you being on the show and what the foundation is about.
Yeah, I appreciate it. One of the biggest things that I'm involved with now is the Avery Huffman Defeat DIPG Foundation, which was established 4 years ago after my 7-year-old daughter, Avery, passed away of a terminal brain tumor she was diagnosed with when she was 6.5 years old. And she fought it for 7.5 months. We were told upon her diagnosis that there was nothing that can be done. And basically we were given a 6 to 12 month time frame and told by the doctors to go and make a lifetime of memories. So we established this foundation shortly after she passed away so that parents never had to hear the phrase, there's nothing that can be done, or go make a lifetime of memories. We wanted to fight back and honor her and tell her story, but to then give hope to other parents that maybe are told this news about their child, that there is going to be hope. So we established the foundation. We were on pace in our first 5 years. Our goal was in the first 5 years, we wanted to raise over $1 million, which goes directly to research and funding of fellowships and grants for doctors that are researching this specific tumor. COVID kind of slowed down our year 5 plans, but it hasn't knocked us off course. We're still sharing her story, sharing her name. She would have turned 12 years old next Monday, but instead, she passed away at the age of 7. So we figured the least that we could do, and she got up every single day and fought. And, never had a day where she sulked. It was, Dad, I have a list of things I want to do today. Let's do them. If she could do it when she was fighting it without sulking, I had no excuse. So we have fought back in her honor. We have all of our social media channels. AveryStrongDIPG.org is our website. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook is AveryStrongDIPG. And our whole thing is to honor her, share her story, but to help families fight back if, God forbid, they ever are dealt the news that we were dealt.
Well, man, I appreciate that. Did not know that. I just knew that, man, and prayers for your family continually. I am going to give this to my wife. I pastor church, Grace Apostolic. We've closed down COVID. We're doing Bible, but we still have people that pay tithes and offering. And so we take that tithes and offering, since we don't use it for a building, and we give to organizations like yours. My niece too has, she's part of Make-A-Wish. She has a brain tumor as well. So we like to give all the time, man. Greg, Brandon, we love that. B Huff, we are going to, I'm gonna get out to my wife and pass that along, man. Appreciate you being on with us. A lot of questions were answered, man.
Oh yeah.
That's what I want. I want to be able to say, hey, y'all heard it. It was done. We recorded it. Go back and watch it.
We could probably do another 2 hours of this with the questions that you're now going to get as a result. Well, why didn't you ask him this? So we may have to revisit this and do it again.
Yeah, that's gonna be the next thing. I have to bring it back. And why wasn't this guy in the class? It'll be the same stuff, man. Well, I appreciate it. I will see you in Santa Clarita. I think you're coming to
in November.
Other events that are going on, and I just appreciate you, man. I want you to enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your family. I'm be looking for your son, man. I want to see him. Now, what does he play?
He's a wide receiver. So right now he's a quickly developing wide receiver. He's still got some weight issues where he needs to put it on. And, I look at him, I'm like, how did I get with this body and you can't put any weight on? He asks me all the time, Dad, am I going to gain weight? I'm like, well, you're a Huffman, so it's probably going to happen. This might not be till you're 35 or 40.
Right. All right, man. Well, we're going to be looking out for him. And don't nobody worry. We're not worried about his stars yet.
No stars.
He's going to be just a regular old guy, regular high school football player. Where he ends up is where he ends up, right?
Exactly.
That's it. Well, enjoy your day, man. Thank you for coming on with me, man. I'll speak with you soon.
Anytime. We'll do it again.
All right. Thank you. Brandon Huffman, man, in the building. I'm so excited right now because no, I didn't talk to him prior to, other than at camps. He spoke about everything that I have told people in Bakersfield for the last 10 years. Sometimes, I'm not, pride comes before a fall, but you only can tell people, and here you heard it from a guy that runs 24/7, Run Sports, been around a long time. Our area kids need an advocate. If you don't hear it, I'm gonna let this play again. I've recorded it for my website. Really wish I wouldn't have had on the Crenshaw shirt, maybe a polo or something, but it is what it is. Laker fans, we won it. But want to thank him for answering a lot of questions, man, that we had here. You guys heard it. I know, EJ, people still not going to listen. They're going to say, well, he knows him and he did. It don't matter. It's true anyhow. Keep listening. He said something that was, high school coaches, his number's available. It is what it is, man. Matt V, what's going on, baby? So a lot of guys just don't get it. He said about the 22 class, if you sitting back waiting, you need to try to figure it out. Yeah, there are always going to be critics. You're absolutely right. Always. I saw Matt. Where my other man, Matt? Where OG Reardon? Matt Reardon, my Pasadena. What up, baby? Yep. Sydney, Tyler, Vaughn. Yeah, we got guys. I'll bring you back on for a topic. You're always welcome to come on, Matt. You haven't called me, you haven't called me in a while. So that was the Coach's Corner. Tomorrow we got Trent Hirschhog, who does the same for National Preps. He's going to come on and talk later in the week. I got a special guest got a college coach coming on to the coach's corner, and we gonna get it. We gonna get it in and talk. I want to thank Coach Maxey for coming on here. Let me tell y'all about Coach Maxey. I'm gonna give y'all about Coach Maxey. Kept me with the Cowboys, and we won yesterday, and I was so excited, and I was rooting for the Cowboys and Darnay all at the same time. But Coach Maxey is the first person who told me exactly what this guy said. He said, Bryce Young, that transfer, y'all just don't know. I'm just excited because I heard some stuff. Man, it's just crazy. When I heard some stuff that other people had said, and I'm listening to this guy say, Bryce Young did what he did. He was a dude, but he even showed you more that he was a dude when he went to Modern Day and enhanced his recruiting and stuff. So I hope everybody learned a lot today. Thank you guys, man. Great show. I think it was a good show. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And then we get, we go from there. And I'll see you guys tomorrow, man. EJ, I'm about to hit you up.